The very public discussion in our nation over transgender policies, transgender ideology, transgender activism, and, oh yeah, parents' rights. It continues on a daily basis with the backdrop of next week's midterm elections looming large. We want politicians to be able to speak outright on this and really tell their stories to make sure that they're on our side on this issue. But sometimes we don't look to elected officials, we don't look to politicians, we don't look to teachers, we don't even look to doctors. We look to one single solitary voice that can make a difference. That's Chris Elston in my mind. He's known as Billboard Chris all over social media. He started out as a concerned father for his two daughters, seeing where the direction this conversation was taking. And Chris, you join us now. Just to remind everybody, you merely stand outside schools or gatherings of doctors, children's hospitals where these procedures and programs are taking place, and you've just got a sign. The message varies, but it's somewhere along the lines of children cannot consent to puberty blockers, things like that. Can you, before we get into where you're focused right now, can you just sort of remind everyone how this started for you and how you were able to raise awareness on this very critical issue?
Honestly, I just got tired of all this craziness going on in our society, and then I decided to take a stand because no one was speaking about this in the real world. So the first thing I did was I put up actual billboards, following the lead of Posey Parker in England, who'd put up one that said, "I love JK Rowling," because JK Rowling has spoken out against this.
Yeah.
And that sign got taken down. So I don't like our freedom of speech being canceled. So I put up a big billboard in Vancouver. It got taken down after one day. A city councilor said it was hate speech. I followed that up with a whole bunch throughout the US. And then because I can't put up a sign in Canada, I decided to become a human billboard. And that's what I do. I go outside, I go to busy areas, I go to downtowns. I don't go to schools very often. I've only done that a few times for specific reasons. But
well, because they can't tear you down. You're a human being, and I think that's just brilliant. Real fast, in Vancouver, what again did that billboard say that was deemed by the local government as hate speech?
I heart JK Rowling,
the author of the beloved Harry Potter series.
That's right.
Because JK Rowling boldly stepped outside the confines of woke ideology and said merely this whole transgender movement, it's erasing women, it's erasing womanhood, and therefore that's hate speech. Unbelievable. And now we're seeing this story manifest in such evil and dark ways. You've been spending a lot of time outside the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. What have you uncovered and discovered there?
Yes, so a woman I follow on Twitter, her name's Megan Eileen. She's actually been uncovering all sorts of videos about the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia where they admit to referring patients, 14 years old girls, to get their breasts cut off. So the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia will give these kids puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and they'll start this as young as 9 or 10 years old. When it comes time for surgery, as young as 14, they send them 100 feet away to the hospital right next door, which is the University of Pennsylvania Hospital. And that's where they do the actual surgeries.
Yeah.
We have children who are in the foster system, homeless youth who come there. They don't need any parental consent because they're deemed emancipated minors, and these kids are way overrepresented at this gender clinic. And we've got this co-founder of the gender clinic at CHOP, it's called, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, quite an accurate acronym.
Wow, yeah.
But she's admitting that age is just a number when it comes to these surgeries, that it depends on the development of these children. And she also says when she's asked about infertility, it's not a big deal because a lot of these kids don't want to have children in the future anyway. What 14-year-old can possibly decide if they want to have kids in the future? A lot of women aren't into their 30s until they decide they want to have kids.
You know, if I were Jon Stewart right now, Chris Elston, I'd say to you, well, you know, you're just some dad. You're not an expert. You have to follow the advice of the American Medical Association. They know better than you. Why are you standing in the way of their scientific expertise?
There's no science to back this at all. And if anyone wants any evidence of that, they should look at what's happened in England. They should read the Cass report and what's happened in Sweden and Finland. These are all countries with socialized medicine where they've done a systematic review of the evidence and they found that there is none. There is no evidence to support transitioning these children as being better for their long-term mental health outcomes. There's no evidence that this reduces actual suicides. In fact, any evidence regarding suicidality points to the exact opposite, that suicides go up. And in England, they've even just stopped recommending that we socially transition these children, or what's a more accurate term, psychological transition, where you give these kids a new name and new pronouns. Because when you do that with these children, you're locking in an identity with a child whose brain is still developing for the next 10 or 15 years still. And you're putting them on this course to medicalization.
Yeah.
And it's very hard.
Before we go further, I want to remind everybody, this is not the life you chose. This is not the life that you expected. You were a concerned father, wanted to protect your daughters, and this has become your full-time occupation. How can people support your efforts if they want to?
Thank you for asking, Larry. I have a website, billboardchris.com. There's a donate button on there. I travel all around the U.S. I still travel around Canada, and I've got trips to Nashville, Tennessee, Birmingham, Alabama, and then Oklahoma coming up in the next month. So if people can help me, that's great.
Let's get to these hospitals. As I said, you're in the middle. You're at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. On the western side of Pennsylvania, we had Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh had all these videos on their website bragging and boasting and advertising about the fact that they did these for minor children, teenagers, 16-year-olds. We had Children's Hospital of Boston. We had Vanderbilt University, University of Virginia. They've all either taken this stuff down or decided, in the case of Vanderbilt, to actually freeze this policy and reevaluate it, whether they'll continue their policies. What are you hearing now from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia as you are engaging with that organization?
You know, it's interesting because I talked to a lot of staff outside and they all agreed with me, but they are not the ones that work in the gender clinics. And this is what people need to understand. Most people are against this. Even most Democratic voters are against this. The politicians, of course, are a completely different story.
Yeah.
But Children's Hospital of Philadelphia hasn't issued any statement. They just keep doubling down on this all the time. Same with most of these gender clinics. But what's interesting is a lot of these gender clinics and a lot of these Children's Hospital websites are deleting their evidence. Boston Children's Hospital deleted all of their YouTube videos that they'd produced after I tweeted them out. We have Vanderbilt, who scrubbed their whole website. They said that they were going to stop these surgeries. And in Oklahoma, where I'm going in December, they were about to receive millions in funding for some COVID relief bill. But because of outrage, they are now making sure that none of these funds are going to go towards the gender clinic.
Wow.
So we are winning this battle.
Yeah.
We just need to keep spreading awareness and getting people aware of what's going on, because when parents find out, they'll put a stop to this.
By the way, everybody needs to be on the alert for that. You know, you're going to see a lot of politicians saying we need COVID relief money to school districts so they can help with counseling for students who were sent home or had to stay home during the pandemic. They're going to use that counseling money to inject gender ideology on your kids. Mark my word, if they haven't started already. Chris, when you're able to engage with some of these doctors, have you been able to actually have a respectful back and forth with any of the medical advocates for this? And if so, does it ever strike their conscience? Do they ever even consider the fact that they could be wrong, disastrously, irrevocably wrong?
Well, the people pushing this refuse to have a conversation. All the advocates for this child sterilization and mutilation, they won't talk about it because they know as soon as they have a conversation that the whole thing falls apart. But if you watch the video of Nadia Doushin at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, as she's getting asked these questions by this legislator, you can see that she's uncomfortable answering them.
Yeah.
She knows it's wrong, but they just kind of weasel their way out. But I went to the American Academy of Pediatrics convention in Anaheim last month, where there were 10,000 doctors. I talked to hundreds of them outside. 95% of them agreed with my stance. But the leadership of the American Academy of Pediatrics is ignoring calls from their own doctors to conduct a systematic review of the evidence or lack thereof for transitioning children. So it's a total disgrace. And the person leading that charge, by the way, is a single gay male who, of course, doesn't have any kids. This is not the person who should be in charge of what's happening with our children.
Yeah, Chris, just about a minute left here, but you're not an American voter, but your recent activity over the last several months is happening, as I said, with the backdrop of this very important election coming up. It's really the first time the American people can vote over the last 2 years where this has become such a prominent issue. You're nonpartisan. You didn't try to make this a partisan political discussion. But you've even observed recently that, yeah, there's one party in this country who seems to be either silent or complicit with this, and that's the Democrats.
That's right. There's not one national Democrat who has spoken out against this. The only one who has was Tulsi Gabbard, and she left the party. We have about 20 states who have introduced legislation, both on the sports issue about men taking over women's sports. And now we do have states like Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, Oklahoma. We have Tennessee. We have other states who are fighting back against this medicalization of children.
Yep.
And so the proper way to go about this is what Florida is doing, which is going about it through their Board of Medicine by examining the science first.
Chris Elston, Billboard Chris, he's on the right side of history. Keep it up, Chris. Thanks for joining us. More to come on O'Connor Tonight.